This week on Act Out, thousands of refugees are seeking asylum from both our foreign policy and climate change. How will we greet them? And how does this moment offer an opportunity for powerful solidarity and paradigm shifting growth? Next up, Reverend Edward Pinkney is on a corporate most wanted list because he demanded, and still demands, human rights and justice for his community. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Blockade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. An orange flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So, I'm not really a fan of the term migrant caravan because it sounds like an attraction at a state fair or something. What this is a refugee march. These people are leaving their homes out of desperation, a desperation carved out of our capitalist hegemony, both politically and ecologically. Most of the refugees are fleeing Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, countries that found themselves squarely in the crosshairs of our decades-long freedom crusades and School of the Americas-style violent political interference in Central and South America. In El Salvador, for instance, the U.S. spent more than $6 billion on direct military assistance to El Salvador's repressive regime. We maintain military bases in ravaged Honduras, the country with the highest murder rate in the world. Back in the 1980s, we trained Contra guerrillas in Honduras in order to attack the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. In 2009, when a coup overthrew the democratically elected President Manuel Zelaya in Honduras, the leader of the coup, Honduran General Romeo Vázquez Velázquez, was a graduate of the notorious School of the Americas. Not to mention that then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton played an important role in preventing Zelaya's return to office and the junta consolidating its power in the face of massive nonviolent protests. Because fuck all that nonsense with new schools and subsidizing public transportation, raising the minimum wage, providing pensions and scholarships and more. That sounds an awful lot like commie talk to me, and we just can't have that. Speaking of which, according to now unclassified CIA documents, the U.S. vis-a-vis the CIA helped organize a coup in Guatemala in 1954 to overthrow their democratically elected government because they were red. What this means in terms of policy was that Guatemala had made a move to end exploitative labor practices. But this threatened our interests, like the United Fruit Company, which held sway over a lot of land in Guatemala. Now, 1954 might sound like ancient history, but the reverberations of our violent meddling in Guatemala are still felt today. As Elizabeth Oglesby, Associate Professor of Latin American Studies at the University of Arizona, put it, the war in Guatemala was really a genocide. She added that an estimated 200,000 were killed in the subsequent 36-year-long civil war, which stretched from 1960 to 1996. The history is important because it went so far beyond anti-communism. The purpose was to destroy people's vision of the future. It had a terrible impact on the country. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. Indeed, the history is important because without it, how can you possibly understand the present? These refugees are refugees from wars that we have ownership in. A war that is still raging as we continue to try and desperately quell leftist movements in Central and South America. And as the capitalist machine lashes out in rabid force against any and all dissidents, a beast of its own creation ravages alongside it. Robert Albro, a researcher at the Center for Latin American Latino Studies at American University, told The Guardian in a recent article that people are moving because they don't have anything to eat. This has a strong link to climate change. We are seeing tremendous climate instability that is radically changing food security in the region. This is reminiscent of some of the same reporting around the crisis in Syria. Severe drought and food insecurity pushed rural populations into cities where the lack of government programs and people-focused policies led to escalating dissent. Back in Central America, migrants shared stories of how low or no yield harvests pushed them to join the march north. One farmer talked of extreme drought, several years without rain, ultimately decimating his crops and therefore his ability to care for himself and his family. Many farmers have also been affected by the coffee plant epidemic leaf rust, which has spread across Central America since 2012, hitting 70% of farms. Warmer temperatures allow it to thrive, whereas previously cold nights would have killed it off. Meanwhile, lower prices for crops compound the already oppressive conditions agricultural workers face. And when a third of all employment in Central America comes from agriculture, any shift in economic or environmental standards has devastating effects, as we now see. And thanks to the political destabilization that we've helped design, when farmers move to cities in their own country, they risk their lives battling everything from gangs to continued military violence. Hence, the move abroad and north becomes a last resort worth trying. As one refugee, Antonio Lara, put it, "I didn't leave my country because I wanted to. I left because I had to." Put yourself in that position. Your government is toppled, a violent dictator takes the throne, you live in poverty without any of the socialized programs previously available, but you just manage to get by as a farmer. But then the winds literally change, no rain comes, crops die by the ton, your livelihood shattered. You go to the city to seek any form of work, only to be met with gang violence, military oppression, and no work. Would you leave the country? Would you try whatever it takes to provide for your family? I can't think of one single damn human being who'd say no. And yet our country is filled with people who look on with a blend of fear and disgust as these refugees near our border. We watch as somewhere between 5,000 and 15,000 troops are sent to fight unarmed refugees who, by the way, are still more than a month away. It's so twisted and backwards. First of all, were it not for a combination of our authoritarian and violent foreign policy and our role in perpetuating global climate change, the roads currently crowded with refugees would be all but empty. As anarchist writer and orator Voltairine de Cleyre wrote more than 100 years ago, the hells of capitalism create the desperate act desperately. Which brings us to the second point. These roads are filled with refugees. So, what can we do about it? Well, first of all, we have to shift how we think about this whole situation. Viewpoint Mag recently published a brilliant piece on just this concept that examines the caravan as a tactic, a way to bring solidarity and community into the common yet often solitary act of migration. The caravan strategy is predicated on the hope that the attention of others, the populations of the world, and not the governments, will ultimately provide a measure of safety. And this addresses yet another powerful aspect of this tactic, visibility. Not just surface visibility that, yes, it's thousands of people moving together, but that this moving is both the antithesis of a system built on divide, conquer, separate, and oppress, but also a defiant response to it. Migration itself, especially in the caravan's notable collective and democratic form, is a political challenge to the capitalist state and a refusal to accept the conditions of exploitation offered in the capitalist system. Already, by choosing to migrate collectively, by determining its own route, the caravan evades and defies the migration industry, the coyotes, police, gang leaders, etc., who directly profit from this mobility, and instead relies on the self-organized support of the communities it encounters on the way. The caravan form itself, by turning a very everyday and quotidian occurrence of migration into a spectacle, is directly staking a political claim by making the invisible or ignored into the visible. It is forcing a response from politicians, but more importantly, from the people. The initial report was 800, then 5,000. Now, as I mentioned, up to 15,000 troops may be at the border to confront these refugees. In an open letter to active duty soldiers, anti-war veterans Rory Fanning and Spencer Rapone opened simply, "Your commander-in-chief is lying to you. You should refuse his orders to deploy to the southern U.S. border should you be called to do so." The letter goes on to outline why this order should be refused and ends with a call for soldiers to organize and resist together, to lay their weapons down. It is undeniable that this caravan is forcing a response. And we've seen responses like the veteran letter. We already know what our government's response is. The question is, how will we respond? Those within geographically defined borders of the U.S. state must seek to amplify the point that is already suggested by the very existence and visibility of the caravan. That the people migrating have a claim to justice, have a claim to solidarity, and that they are already part of a broader American community insofar as their political and economic existence is inseparable from the political and economic operations of U.S. imperialism. This is not a matter of the inside looking out. We are all a part of this capitalist, colonialist, imperialist shit show. We're just at a slightly different point on their board game. It follows then that our response will be a collective one. Our response will affect our future just as much as it affects theirs, because we are the people. We have far more in common with those walking than those signing orders to send troops to stop them in their tracks. Therefore, our present response must reflect a future that we want to be part of. A refusal to process this event through a looking glass of fear or violent repulsion, but also a refusal to relegate this event as a footnote to the supposed strategic core of electoral work. Instead, a true domestic alternative insists on considering that maybe we are not who we thought. As the Chilean song goes, El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united will never be defeated. To learn more about the march, visit pueblosinfronteras.org. Back in 2004, Reverend Edward Pinkney led a successful campaign against Whirlpool in Benton Harbor, Michigan. The site of Whirlpool's headquarters, Benton Harbor is your classic corporate sacrifice zone, 90% black with high unemployment and poverty rates, plus a pocketed justice system. The racist roller coaster ride of Pinkney's legal troubles is quite a damn read, wrapping up with a 30-month prison sentence based on alleged date changes on a recall petition. No, really. After the successful boycott Whirlpool campaign back in 04-05, Reverend Pinkney became a constant focus and a constant pain to Whirlpool and their paid-off representatives, as he organized to stand against the pointed removal and destruction of his community, just for the sake of the purpose of corporate development. The powers that be threw everything they had at him: house arrest, threats, bribes, but nothing stuck. In 2013, Reverend Pinkney delivered signatures in favor of holding a recall of then-Mayor James Hightower, citing Hightower's opposition to a city income tax, which would have made Whirlpool actually pay taxes, which they don't, neither federal nor state. Instead, they receive tax credits. In response, the court system demanded a stay on the vote to recall, citing an issue with the signatures. In October of 2014, Reverend Pinkney was sentenced to 2.5 to 10 years in prison for altering dates on the Hightower recall petition, which is not a thing. There is literally no law that deals with dates on a recall petition. But as court observers have noted, when lines like, "I know you're innocent and I'm going to put you away," and "I don't care if there's no law for this, I'm going to make one up," are par for the course in these local courtrooms, it's really not terribly surprising that the fact that this black anti-corporate power community organizer was put away on a bogus charge. Historically speaking, courtrooms across the U.S. excel at this type of justice. From Huey P. Newton to Assata Shakur, to the MOVE members, to Leonard Peltier, to Mumia Abu-Jamal, and then some. Uncle Sam hates nothing more than a black, brown, or indigenous person demanding human rights. Which is exactly what Pinkney did, and does. Whirlpool was just one of several ongoing battles that Pinkney has waged. As noted in a Counterpunch article from 2015, why is Reverend Pinkney in prison? Too many reasons to count. For over a decade, he spent nearly every day that Barron County Court was in session, court watching, taking notes, and helping defendants understand their rights. Each week for years, he led a group of community activists from Benton Harbor to march on the courthouse in St. Joseph, wearing the famous Barron County's Most Wanted t-shirts, listing the most corrupt and racist judges and other county officials. On one visit, I found him at the public library. Every Tuesday, he held office hours there, consulting with Benton Harbor residents about discrimination claims, legal problems, whatever problems with which he could lend a hand. For years, he organized monthly community-wide forums, bringing in outside speakers with an emphasis on economic and political self-determination and standing up to police brutality and harassment. That is why he spent 30 months in prison, and that is why he is still a threat, because he demands actual justice. He demands actual rights for him and his community. Last week, he was kind enough to take a day off of court watching to sit down with us and talk about recent community work and wisdom for the fight. Take a look. So let's start off first with current events. I understand your latest work is focusing on the lead levels in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And of course, most of the folks watching this will be familiar with Flint, Michigan's water crisis and the water shutoffs in Detroit. What's going on in Benton Harbor?
Oh, we have always had a problem with the water, but it was never publicized. The first thing they wanted to do was they used it as a tool back in 2003 to eliminate people in the community. They came in and they started raising the water rate. They tripled the water rate, and when people weren't able to pay for the water, they cut their water off, and then they put a condemned sign on their home. And during that process, they was trying to really to take the land so they can build this Jack Nicklaus signature golf course, and surround it with these $500,000 homes, and also to drive the people completely out of the community. I had warned the community back in 2002 what they was trying to do, and they said, "Well, Pinkney, you don't know that. You don't really know what evidence do you have to show?" But I have seen this before. I watched it in Chicago. I watched it in St. Louis. I watched it in all these different places, and exactly what I said was about to happen happened. And now what they're doing now, we have what we call more lead in our water than Flint, Michigan have ever had. See, Whirlpool Corporation is behind everything that goes on in this community. They have one main objective, that is to drive the African-American, low-income people completely out of the community.
And that's what I'd like to touch on that too, because you were sent to prison. Yes. For 30 months because of what happened with Whirlpool. And this is an apt time to be talking about this because Amazon has just announced their new headquarters in Queens and Crystal City. And you basically went to prison for standing up to a big corporation, Whirlpool, which is, a big corporation like Amazon is a big corporation. And as I understand it, Michigan Supreme Court overturned the conviction, but only after you'd already served the time. A conviction that was founded on a totally bogus charge. Talk about what they were really after you for.
Well, they figured that I was the boss here in the city of Benton Harbor. They figured if we get rid of Pinkney, we can continue what we've been doing all along. But even from prison, I was still giving directives to people on what we need to do, and they couldn't stand it.
I wanted to shift to something that you had a quote of yours. Little bitty Benton Harbor was the testing ground. It was a testing ground to see what they can get away with. It's coming to your city next, wherever whether you like it or not. I want to talk about that quote because I think that's particularly right now as we're seeing with the rise of fascist violence and the rise of white supremacist violence across the country. Do you see what you've experienced personally? Do you see that spreading?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when they first came here, they came here with the idea of a very poor community. When I said very poor, I mean exactly that. They said 70% of the people is unemployed. You have maybe 90% of people living below the poverty level. They have a lower figure, but in reality, it's about 90%. And they figured that there would be no resistance here at all. And that's what they was counting on. These people will not stand up because they're too busy trying to survive. But we came up with a formula that shows that this could be the last stand. You know, if we don't stand up and fight now, we'll never get the opportunity to stand up and fight again because they're coming. And they have all the resources to do whatever they want to do. They was paying people underneath the table to do things that was really basically illegal. But unfortunately, we didn't have the police department behind us. We didn't have the courthouse behind us. We didn't have the state reps behind us. We didn't have the Senate behind us. And here's something that you may not know. Fred Upton is the heir to Whirlpool Corporation. He's a state rep, a U.S. state rep. And he's behind all of this that's going on today. It's him and his family. And what they're doing is basically illegal, but they can get away with it until somebody step in and say it's illegal. And that's the way it is.
And you mentioned the police department. Talk about the law enforcement issues in Benton Harbor as well that you've come up against.
Well, here's what they do. Like for instance, when they came out to arrest me, they sent the SWAT team to my house for a recall petition. They surrounded my whole neighborhood. Nobody can come in down the street. Nobody can come out. Nobody can go out their house. The whole community was locked down for a recall petition. And they could have called me on the phone and I would have came in to the courthouse. But unfortunately, you know, they wanted to show it really wasn't all about me, but it was to intimidate the community. And that's what they were thinking of. We're going to shut this community down. We're going to show them our power. We're going to show them what we can do. And this is even something as small as this, we'll make it big. One thing they don't want is to see people working together. They don't want to see black people, white people, Mexicans, and anything, everybody working together. And that's my message. I really don't care about what color you are or you know what nationality you are. You see, we got the same problem. Let's work together and let's win. And I believe in winning.
And what would you say? I mean, the obviously, like, you're incredibly powerful as a community organizer. What would you say the response has been since you've gotten out of prison? I mean, Whirlpool was obviously hoping to shut you up, and they didn't. Have you experienced any sort of surveillance or harassment since you've left prison?
All the time. You know, they know I don't care. See, the difference between me, I don't care about what they do. See, it's not really important what they do. What's important is what I do. You see, I know what they're going to do. I know their main objective is to stop me. My job is to make sure that they don't intimidate me in the community, you see. And by me going, I go straight to the courthouse every day in court watch. I would have been over there today, but I had to do the interview with you. But yeah, but I go over there and purposely so they can see my face, so they know that I'm not intimidated by their actions. You know, even as far as trying to destroy our community, we're fighting. You know, we're fighting with the smallest amount of resources. And what they're doing now, they're even taking over our schools, and Whirlpool is behind all this stuff that's going on. All the bad stuff that happened in our community is by Whirlpool. They sent, we're a public school system with a CEO, which that tells us that, you know, we don't have no superintendent, no board. Only thing we have is a CEO, and whatever he say is final, almost like the emergency manager, which is so amazing. And you probably got an idea about the emergency manager, how that worked. They brought the emergency manager in specifically for Benton Harbor. And when they brought him in, they gave him absolute power. He became a dictator. The first thing he did, at that time, we had a pretty decent mayor. He wasn't all bad. They took his desk and put it in the basement. This is the emergency manager, letting them know that he had all power. They changed the locks on all the commissioners' door. And they was mad, but they wasn't real mad. But here's what they made their mistake. They took away their cell phone. And one thing you got to remember, you can never, ever take a black man's cell phone. If you take a black man's cell phone, you got a fight on their hand. Because then they wanted to come and join me. See, now what we have now, we got layers of power, you see. And then they're following me. They're not leading me, but they're following me. And they didn't like that, you see. So we all got together and we stood up and fought against the emergency manager. Then it went up to Flint, Michigan. Then it went to Detroit, and from here, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, Ann Arbor, Flint, Michigan, as Detroit, Pontiac, Michigan, we all got together and we became an army.
So finally, wrapping up, I'm curious because you've been in prison and you're still doing incredible community organizing. What would you say to folks that are afraid of getting involved because they're afraid of this kind of power that's wielded by corporations and the threat of becoming a political prisoner?
Well, the first thing you got to understand, every day is going to be something in your life. You got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So you have an opportunity to take care of the children. Your children is that's the tool I use on people. I tell them it's about your children, the future of your children. There's never a fight I don't like. You know, if it concerns the people, I'm happy to be part of it. And I will help whoever it is. And like I said, we don't care. I don't care. You know, whether a person is Mexican, Latino, black, white, blue, polka dot, I don't really care. I don't care what you are. You know, if you got a problem and if I can help, I have an obligation to help you. And that's what I do.
To keep up with Reverend Pinkney's work, visit BH Banco for Black Autonomy Network Community Organization, bhbanco.org. And that will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people that you don't know. Again, check out the last slide and the show description online in order to find sites that I've mentioned in this week's show. And for interim updates, please make sure that you sign up for our newsletter at the link below. It is the best way to stay informed. To those who have donated, thank you so much. Please keep spreading the word in order to ensure our ability to keep acting out. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, visit patreon.com/actout.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some roster through. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left for nothing, motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been backing up inch by inch, we got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since you pushed and shoved my shove.